One, I'm about to introduce to you author Jennifer ZEYNAB, and her last name, I don't want to butcher it, and I'm sorry, Jennifer, excuse my really poor accent, Joukhadar. And it's close, okay? I know she's going to say beautiful, and she will correct me. But anyway, I am so excited that I'm talking to her. Oh my God, everybody, the Map of Salt and Stars, I came out May 1st. If you have not read this book, go get it. I cannot wait. I know she is somewhere in the world. She's not here in the United States, so pray for a good connection. And everybody, here is Jennifer. Hi everyone, I am so excited because I am speaking with author Jennifer ZEYNAB, and last name I'm going to try really hard, Joukhadar. Joukhadar?
Joukhadar.
Joukhadar. Ooh, so close. And we're talking about her book, her debut novel, The Map of Salt and Stars. Look at this cover because everybody is raving about this cover, and I want everybody to know, I'm just going to brag about you a little bit. Debut novel, Goodreads Choice Awards for historical fiction and debut novel. And I love the Goodreads Choice Awards because they're from your readers. They're directly your readers who are voting for your book. A lot of the other awards are people's opinions and, you know, but I always pay attention to Goodreads because people are voting and they voted this for you and it's your debut novel and you must be so excited.
That was amazing. I was really touched. I mean, and the fact that it was up for 2 categories, and just to be a finalist in historical fiction was like, it was huge. So that was a lot.
Especially when you see the people you're up against who've been writing historical fiction for like ever, right?
Oh yeah, for it to be a first book and to see other people, you know, that it was their second, third, who knows, book, and I was like, wow, this is really like this. It was amazing. So.
Oh my gosh, I was so thrilled for you, and especially when I saw it up there, I was just like, yes, yeah. I mean, I get just as excited as you guys do because I'm a reader, and I can't vote though because I interviewed all those authors. I'm like, I feel like I can't vote because I love you all. But I mean, just to be there, I was just so excited for you. And what I love, I'm going to talk about everything I love about this book. I mean, the title is perfect for this book. The cover, of course, everybody's saying, everybody, Goodreads, Amazon, everywhere, everybody's like, this cover is just, I saw people say they read this book because of the cover, and that is thrilling, you know?
The design team did an amazing job. I remember when I first saw the image for it, and I was completely blown away. And I can tell you stories about like all the things that I love. The fact that there's Arabic on it too, which was for me was like incredibly moving because it's not something I get to see all the time. So yeah, I'm in love with the cover too.
yeah, but I love the beginning. This book is poetic. I mean, the way you write is just so different. And that's why when I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is like a song. This is like lyrical. I mean, yeah. And so the beginning, it's kind of a poem. It's not a poem, but you start off talking about Syria and go read it, everybody, because you got to read it. It's beautiful. But you start off then the first sentence, just to give people a little, touch. The island of Manhattan's got holes in it, and that's where Baba sleeps. I was like, oh my God, what? That's so beautiful. That first line, I love a good first line. I love that because we find out, Baba dies, and I live very close to New York City, so I am very familiar with New York City. So those parts of it I could really connect to. But I learned so much about Syria. And I love reading historical fiction where you learn about places you didn't even know, And you grew up in New York City, right?
I did, yeah. I was actually born there. I was born in Manhattan. So, I mean, New York, it's funny because I actually did live in New York for a period recently, again, after many years of being out of the city. But it's funny because after leaving, even after being away for a period of time, the city is kind of always, I have this like ongoing relationship with the city, I guess you could say. And I keep writing about it. I find myself like still returning to it and returning to my childhood in the city over and over again. I guess it's just such a complex place, so it's important to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought I wanted to live there, and I don't know. Like, sometimes I go there and I'm like, oh, no. And then sometimes I go there and I'm like, oh, yes, I want to live here,
There's a million different cities within New York, right?
Yes.
So
Yes, absolutely. It all has a different feel to it, you know. But
Yeah.
this story, tell us about how you came up with this story. Because another thing I want everybody to know is I've read so many books with different timelines. But the way you wove, I was actually confused in the first chapter because I kept waiting for a break. You know, like, but you wove it into the story that I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, I've never, usually they tell you, okay, you're in this, you know, we're now in 2011. Okay, now we're back in, you know, but you didn't do it like that. So I want to hear about like how you did that.
Sure. Well, so actually, what I was thinking when I was structuring the book was I wanted to draw, instead of drawing on traditional Western literary structures, the kind of stuff that I read in high school, the kind of stuff that that is more common, I guess, in Western literature, I wanted to draw on traditional Arab storytelling techniques. And in particular, there is a very common technique of interweaving stories. I actually, one of my favorite books of all time, another book that does this really well, that I was just really, when I read it, I was incredibly moved by it, is The Hekawati by Rabi al-Madin. And he interwove, actually, I think more than two, I think it was at least 3 threads. And I remember reading it and thinking, like, wow, you can do this. Because it's something that I'm familiar with in other types of storytelling, but I haven't seen it so much in English language literature, Anglophone literature. And so I really wanted to do that with this story, especially because I felt that because it's a story about the importance of stories and the ways that we can take home with us in stories, even if we can't take it with us physically or can't return to it, I wanted to have someone telling themselves a story. So that you have these 2 timelines, but in reality, it creates this sort of third story in the middle that can't really exist without the tension between the 2 timelines. So that you read the present day and you think, well, what does it mean if the person is telling themselves this story? And then you read the story and you think, what does this story actually mean in the context of what's happening in the present day? And I feel like they can't really exist without each other in order to say what I wanted to say.
Well, I think that's why everybody was just so thrilled with this book because it is so different. You know, it's like it's a different kind of a historical fiction than us in America are used to reading, you know, and everybody was just raving about it. And I didn't get it until I started reading it. I was like, wow. And then as you go further into the story, it's like it takes on a life of its own. And there are so many quotes in this book. I mean, I look at you and I'm like, she's so young. How does she know this stuff? How is she you're so like mature for your age? Like, and so I had written like so many of them down as I was coming upon them. I like write them down. But this morning I was going over them and I love this one. Stories ease the pain of living, not dying. And I was like, right. You know, but you know, you are just so like worldly for your age, and I can't wait to see what you do like from here because because this book is just that incredible, and people go on. I mean, there are quote after quote after quote. I mean, I just sat after a while. I'm like, oh my! Every other chapter, I'm like, this is so amazing, and it leads to the understanding, not just like understanding because I knew nothing. Okay, you grew up in the American school system. We do not learn about this stuff. You know, we do not know the history of Syria. I actually am in a community. I live here in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We have a huge Syrian community here.
I was actually recently in Allentown. That's so funny. For the Society of the Arts, I did an event there with several other authors. So I was there just a few months ago.
Oh, that's so nice. That's awesome. Yeah. But yeah, my sister-in-law is Syrian. And it's very it's a huge community, but yeah. I do remember that there were times that people would go back and then they stopped. And when I was reading this book, I kept thinking about it because it's like I was trying to remember, oh, why did they stop going there back then? And I think it was because of the what was going on and what we learn about in your book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was it hard during that time, was it hard to travel there?
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I have never been able to go because the situation, whether here or there, has been very precarious for Syrian Americans in particular. Now, given the Muslim ban, it's obviously impossible for people to come here from Syria and to go there as a Syrian American. Depending on the situation, of course, it can be extremely complicated depending on the passport you have, depending on a lot of things. So, yeah, it's still very complex, if not impossible, for a lot of people.
Oh, Interesting. So talk about, right, so the first timeline with the 2011 with Noor, and I think that's what I hear in my head. So
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
yes. but the other timeline that is so interesting, that was like 800 years before, and the whole map making, and I'm going to let you say her name so I don't mess it up.
Rauya.
So you say it's so beautiful. In my head, it's so not beautiful. And and tell us about that, like, because I am so interested in that. And I read on Goodreads, there were some people that were actually taking maps and going with you, like reading this book with a map. How cool is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's also why I worked with my editor, with the publishing house, to put the map in the end papers, because we did think together, we were talking about this and about how it helps to have that link between the two timelines to see where they are geographically. I mean, that's kind of how I structured when I was thinking, okay, I have these two stories, these two timelines. How am I going to structure this in a way that will make it a little bit easier for the reader to come along, because they are so different? And I thought, let me do it geographically, where one person visits a place, the other person either catches up to them or has just been there. And so there's this comparison of what's happening now with what happened in the past, which I also like because it allowed me to show that a lot of these countries that the characters are passing through in 2011, this is right after the Arab Spring. There's a lot happening. Some places are experiencing more conflict and some are not. And I wanted to talk about the fact that, I mean, in the West, the narrative we get so often is that all of these places are full of violence all the time, and that so many of them are destroyed. And it's quite an oversimplification to say that. And I wanted to show not only that, is that an oversimplification, but also that these places have such rich history, and that they've experienced, just like the rest of the world, obviously lots of conflict in the past, but that there's also this incredible heritage, and that obviously not everything is lost. And that was really what was at the heart of the book, was the idea that not everything is lost. There is still so much that people are carrying with them, and continue to make things creatively and to find joy and to connect with each other. And I wanted to kind of present that as an alternate narrative to what we're getting, at least in America.
Oh, yeah. And, like I said, just learning about that part of the world, because you can get so caught up in this part of the world, right? And learning that, because over there, countries changed, lines change. And so the map making, I mean, as a skill, I was like, I hadn't really ever thought about how they could keep track of, like, in the ancient times, like, how did they keep track of? Well, they had these map makers who went out, and I don't know. It was thrilling for me, okay? To just know what, because you don't really think about it, right? But then when you sit down and think about it, it's like, that is just, I don't know. It's an incredible story. It really is.
Yeah. I'm glad to make people think about that too, because with borders, even if you think about the history of the United States, obviously borders were violently imposed as a result of genocide. I mean, our borders in this country have changed, obviously, many, many times. Right. And borders are such a mechanism of power. And so much of what I wanted to examine was the ways that borders function as institutions of power, as that they can be also violent to a lot of people, especially displaced people. And so that's obviously a really complex thing. I wanted to try to let that breathe on the page in terms of how this family navigates that, because it is really difficult.
Yeah, and the ending is so amazing. Everybody just get to the ending. But I want to talk about, like, what are you going to do now? Like, you've got this. I mean, and this is hugely successful. Your debut novel. Like, what does your future look like?
Well, I am in the process of revising a second novel, which I can't say much about, but I will say it's not related to this one. It's not a sequel, okay. But it is, in this case, like I said, it is a novel, but it has more to do with the history of Syrian immigration to the U.S., and also, again, deals with, at least in part, if not the whole book, but in part about New York City and the history of New York City and the Syrian American community that was in Lower Manhattan for a long time, up until the late 40s, called Little Syria. which I think is interesting because I don't think a lot of people are aware that there was this community, but there was, and there's still like historical sites in that part of Lower Manhattan that speak to that history. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. And I can't wait to read that because, like I said, everybody who I know here in Allentown who's Syrian, we have like a little, you want to call it a little Syria in Allentown. We have that.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's incredible because I don't think that people notice it until you do notice. You know, it's like look around and you're like, oh, the store names, it's its own little, very small, but its own little place where they have their own hairdressers, they have their own restaurants, they have, and I would love to hear about their history because I know a lot of them are only second generation, that are, very close to first generation of immigrants to here. So I think that I can't wait to read it. That'll be amazing.
Very much. Thanks.
Yeah. So I am, you're traveling the world. I mean, we're talking, we have a better connection. I thought you were in New York. That's how good our connection is. Okay.
No, but it worked. Somehow the connection from Italy is actually really clear. So
I know, isn't that crazy? Sometimes like in Philly, I can't get a good connection. You're in Italy and we have this like amazing connection. So hold up the cover one more time because I'm going to put all the links listed below for this. You can go get it right now. This book just came out in May. Right?
May 1st, yeah.
And it's just done a huge, huge things. I can't wait for your next one. You know where to find me.
Thank
I'll read it
you.
early. I'll be there. So
thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And have a happy holiday and happy travels wherever you're off to. And,
Thank you. Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for, talking with me and getting this out there. I really
Absolutely,
appreciate it.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day.
Too. Bye.
We had an amazing connection. She was in Italy. That is crazy. Oh my God. How sweet is she? She is so incredibly sweet and young. And like when I was reading this book, I'm like, how old is she? She is so wise beyond her years. Okay. God, what great quotes. I mean, you got to go get this book. Like I said, up for Goodreads Awards, 2 categories. Anyway. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Links are below. And thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for making this interview happen. Have a great day, everyone.